Welcome everyone to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health, a straightforward approach to enhance your mood and memory and reduce the effects of stress and aging. I'm Lisa Bunnies, and I'm really looking forward to hosting this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Dr. Mary Bove and address questions about her upcoming 5-week course, Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health, which begins Wednesday, September 5th. Later, I'll explain how you can participate in this course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Dr. Mary Bove obtained her Doctorate of Naturopathic Medicine from Bastyr University of Natural Health Sciences in Seattle and received her Diploma of Phytotherapy and Herbal Medicine at the School of Phytotherapy in Great Britain. Dr. Bove practiced naturopathic family medicine at the Brattleboro Naturopathic Clinic in Vermont for 25 years, specializing in naturopathic pediatrics and botanical medicine. I could go on, but her extensive credentials are available in the bio section of the course's website at herbsforbrainhealth.com. So go ahead and check that out if you want to know what else she's done. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Dr. Mary Bove. Welcome, Mary. It is such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to having this session and having our questions and answers.
So am I. Well, why don't you go ahead and get us started by telling us just a little bit about your course? And I understand you have a recipe that you'd like to share with us.
I do. I'm very excited to be able to share a recipe, which is one of the things that will be great about this course is that we'll actually be sharing a number of recipes that many people can use right there at home and that are useful in brain health. And what we're doing in the course is we've broken it down to 5 modules, and it gives us a chance to be able to have a discussion about what is a healthy brain and how to age healthy and what are some of the aspects and ways that herbs might actually assist the brain in healthy aging and some of the things we're concerned about, such as performance and stamina, memory, and focus. And then the other 4 modules will hone in on some very specific aspects, such as memory and focus, also how to stay sharp. And I think we all could use those hints. And there are many really great, both scientific pieces of information and traditional pieces of information we can use in staying sharp. Also, we'll be talking about mood and ways in which we can assist our mood, whether we've got the blues or we're feeling a little nervous or anxious. In some ways, we can find herbal remedies and herbal foods and ways to use them. And we'll be talking about what are some of the best ways that we can use them as far as preparations, whether that might be a tea or an extract, and also to look at some of the more recent modern science behind it, as we're seeing that many people are so interested in this topic that there's a lot of good research that's beginning to help herbs have a nice understanding as to how they can interface with our nervous system and our brain and brain health. And so that's what we'll be doing.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and hear that recipe.
Great. Yes. Our recipe today that we're going to be talking about is called Maple Ashwagandha Evening Beverage. And one of the things that this beverage is very useful for is that it actually helps our body get ready for sleep. So sometimes we think about something to just knock us out and make us go to sleep, but every day our body goes through kind of its own process and transition to get to sleep. So this formula, which has ingredients of chamomile and milky oats, both 2 plants that are very useful for helping to get relaxed and get ready for sleep. And we're taking that and making a tea from that. So we're going to infuse those in 12 ounces of boiling water. And we're going to pour that over the herbs and let them sit for 5 minutes. And you steep them covered. There are volatile compounds in the chamomile that we want to make sure stay within our beverage. So we're going to cover that up while it's steeping. After it's done steeping, we're going to strain the herbs out, and then we're going to whisk in a half a teaspoon of ashwagandha powder. Now, ashwagandha is a root that we're using, but we're going to be using it powdered up, and you can get that easily at your health food or your herb store. And with that, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. So that's a quarter teaspoon ashwagandha powder and a quarter teaspoon nutmeg, whisked in with 1 to 2 teaspoons of coconut powder, all available in your local co-op or natural food store. You're going to mix that all together and then add in 1 teaspoon of maple syrup. And I come from New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont, and so we specialize in maple syrup, and it makes a really nice antioxidant, high mineral contribution to our drink. We serve that warm, which helps to soothe us and help to wind down. So it's a really nice drink that you can take after dinner or sometime in the evening before going to bed to help soothe in and get you ready for sleep.
That actually sounds pretty tasty as well. So thank you for sharing that. So we have the rest of our time together to dive into our viewers' questions for Dr. Mary Bove as we prepare for her upcoming course. Again, that's called Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health. And again, it begins Wednesday, September 5th. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the course, you can visit herbsforbrainhealth.com to see the full description. So let's go ahead and get started with questions. If you have a question for Mary, go ahead and type it in, and I'll be happy to read it aloud. But before we get started, I want to first state that the vast majority of the questions that have already come in are from people seeking medical advice for specific conditions. And of course, Mary can't prescribe or give medical advice in a forum like this. However, she can offer suggestions for you to look into with your health practitioner. So with that said, let's go ahead and get rolling. Let's start with a question here from Eileen. I think a lot of people might wonder this. If one is taking the medicinal herbs as recommended, does caffeine from coffee counteract the medical benefits?
Well, caffeine is an alkaloid, and that is a plant compound, and many plants that we use medicinally have those plant compounds. And so those types of compounds are often used to working with each other. But with caffeine and coffee particularly, sometimes that can disrupt your gastrointestinal function, or your stomach function. And if that's the case, it can actually impinge or inhibit or even enhance the way you absorb plants. So if someone's drinking coffee, it's best not to take your plants at the same time. They can still drink coffee, but take your herbal remedies or your teas for herbs or your tinctures or liquids, take them at a different time than when you're drinking your coffee.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's really helpful. And let's go along those same lines. Jean wants to know, she says, I take a lot of vitamin and herb supplements already. How do I figure out what kind of interactions the herbs that you suggest might have with the ones that I already take?
That's a complex question because there's not one place to look for that information. It's the kind of information that often you gander over time. I would certainly say that there are some information on interactions or enhancements. Many times in herbal medicine, we call that synergy. And so we often find that um, other herbs will enhance or will have an effect on the action or the uptake absorption from the body of each other. But I would certainly suggest not trying to take a lot of nutrients at the same time as your botanicals. And again, you can search on the internet for those kinds of interactions, but there's no one simple answer to the question that you're asking.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here from Suzanne regarding your recipe. She wants to know, can I warm up coconut milk to use over the herbs instead of the powder?
Yes, if you have a liquid form of coconut milk and you'd like to use that in the recipe, you certainly can add that in. I would whisk in your powdered herbs to your tea infusion that you've made, and then add the warm coconut milk to that along with your maple syrup sweetener.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to a question from Danielle, who I think probably speaks for a few people. Danielle says, in my wayward youth, I used more than my share of recreational drugs, and now I'm concerned that I may have killed off a few too many brain cells. Is there anything I can do to repair any damage that I might have done?
That's an excellent question. And I think, Danielle, it's more than just recreational drugs. Sometimes just things we don't even realize we come in contact in our environment can have impact on our brain cells. And yes, you can do some things in the sense that brain cells have the ability, neurons have the ability to regenerate, particular parts of the brain more so than others. And there are herbs that have been shown to be both what we would call neuroprotective as well as be restorative and help with regeneration. So we may think of some particular plants like gotu kola, which is a Ayurvedic plant that's known for restoring and regenerating neurons. We have another Ayurvedic plant, which is called Bacopa, which also has been shown to be neuroprotective as well as improving and helping regenerate neurons. So, taking these kinds of plants on a regular basis, either in a liquid extract form or in some of the other forms that are available for tonics and brain foods, you can actually help to recharge some of those areas. It would take time. And many times the studies will show us maybe 12 weeks or 16 weeks until they start to remeasure how well those plants are doing. So it's not something you're going to see, after a week or two of taking it, but if you give it a couple of months, many times you'll see good improvements in that sense. And particularly if you can identify an area where you may be a little bit concerned and you're wanting to improve that function.
Okay, great. Well, while we're on the subject, let's go to a question here from Mitch, who says, what about medical marijuana? I use that for pain relief instead of opioids, but after years of just say no campaigns, I'm concerned. Does it cause harm to the brain?
Medical marijuana, like many medicinal plants, offers many beneficial attributes to the brain and to human health. It also can, particularly at times of development, when someone is using copious amounts or, as I said, developing like a child's brain or adolescent's brain when they're developing, we do find that there can be some compromises. And we know that with short-term memory and medical marijuana or cannabis use, that there can be an issue. And given that, if somebody is using medical marijuana for pain relief and having good efficacy with that, then using plants that serve to be neuroprotectors at the same time can actually help the brain to be able to avoid some of those repercussions. So looking at short-term memory, one might look at using a plant like rosemary, which has both an antioxidant quality, giving it a neuroprotective quality, as well as a quality in helping to improve oxygen delivery and uptake by the cells in the brain. And the brain uses quite a bit of oxygen. So that could be a helpful tea or plant to use in culinary form while you're having to use marijuana for your pain control.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to a question here from Patricia, who says, what are the best herbs for preventing dementia and for helping mitochondria health?
Well, there's a big word, mitochondrial health. And certainly I would say mitochondria is a kind of our energy centers of the cells for everyone to be on the same page. So it's really how do we make good energy and utilize that energy in our brain? And certainly there would be a couple of different aspects to that. Certainly there are plants that help to restore and improve mitochondrial output. And also a part for the brain is to make sure that there's enough food. And so that food that's necessary is dependent on good metabolism of our glucose. So when we're looking at that, if I was to hone in on one particular plant, I would hone in on holy basil, because holy basil has a particular effect in helping us to metabolize our glucose so we're more optimal in getting energy and utilizing it for mitochondrial production of energy, as well as having the benefit of being a neuroprotective and improving clarity and focus and concentration within the brain. And so that would certainly be very helpful in that aspect. Now, as I mentioned earlier, both Goticola and Bicopa would be two other plants that I would continue to think of for just that exact piece. And so one might end up using a combination of liquid extracts that were a combination of Bicopa, Goticola, and holy basil as a brain boosting, brain protecting, recharging formula.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's follow that up with a question about that includes holy basil in here. Gabrielle says, I have found a pre-mixed tea blend that I love and drink often, but I wonder what effects the ingredients have when used almost daily. They're peppermint, licorice root, fennel, and holy basil. Is this mixture safe to drink often?
That sounds like a lovely tea. I particularly like the taste of licorice, and I think people who like peppermint and licorice as a flavor, that's a tea it is blended as what we would call a daily beverage tea. And typically that kind of a tea is done with plants that we would consider to be useful and safe on a daily basis. Now, when we say that, I'm not talking about taking 10 cups of tea a day. I'm talking about using 1 or 2 cups of tea a day. And plants like holy basil, which is an adaptogen and also very useful on a daily basis, can be a daily support. Fennel, as well, is a plant that can be used on a daily basis because it is an aromatic food, and many aromatic foods are actually very supportive to the brain. Licorice, typically as a tea form, in the amount that you're going to get, licorice would be considered safe. Now, certainly people with hypertension are often told to avoid licorice because sometimes that can raise the blood pressure. And so if that was your picture, then you may not want to choose using this tea on a daily basis. And then you also asked about peppermint. And as you know, peppermint is probably one of our most long traditioned plant used for indigestion or for upset stomach. And again, the only thing I would just take caution with is that there are some people who have gastric ulcers who find peppermint to be disruptive to their gastric ulcer. So for that particular person, they may not want to be using peppermint on a daily basis. But for, the normal kind of day-to-day support for brain function as an adaptogen tea, and if you don't have digestive issues and or blood pressure issues, it can be a lovely tea.
All right, thanks for that. Let's go to a question from Larissa, who says, which herbs are good for ADHD?
ADHD. So we're talking about attention deficit disorder. And that's really looking at plants that affect the metabolism and the function of focus in the brain. And there are a number of aspects that you want to cover with that, in the sense that focus can be disrupted by poor circulation to the brain, or from lack of oxygen from the brain, or because of poor brain chemistry. And the one of the plants that comes directly to my mind right away is what we call lemon balm. And lemon balm is a member of the mint family that has a really lovely lemon scent and a heart-shaped leaf. And it's very traditional for focus and concentration, and for calming, and for helping to relax when you're in the moment of that agitation or irritability. And because it has had such a strong history in that way, science and botanical research has spent a lot of time looking at the effects of lemon balm, or I often call it Melissa. And we know now that Melissa has many, many functions that it applies and influences to the brain. There has been a number of science studies with children who are affected by ADHD using Melissa for improving function of focus, concentration, to relieve anxiety that can often come from those children when they're feeling anxious. They get more inattentive, and in the long run, helping to improve the way the brain actually can take information in. So that would be a plant that would come right away to me. And often what we find when we look at formulas for ADHD in botanical medicine, we find it combined with Gotu Kola, which makes sense because Gotu Kola not only helps with focus and with the function of the brain, but it helps to feed the brain and give it the energy it needs and to help to improve and restore and revitalize the brain cells themselves, which is really important. And at an energetic level, we would say often with ADHD, we can have kind of a hot or heated up constitution, and Gotu Kola and lemon balm are actually cooling to our constitution and helping to, reinforce that focus for us. And lemon balm has this little nickname as the happy herb, which is very nice to be able to use a plant that actually picks up our mood and improves our sense of well-being. And kids who deal with ADHD often have self issues about their self-concepts and their and who they are because of the challenges that they find from having ADHD. So it really has a number of benefits that it can bring somebody who's dealing with ADHD.
Okay, thank you. Fascinating. Here's a question from Margaret, who wants to know, what do you think of lemongrass tea? And let me add, you were just talking about lemon balm, and now she's asking about lemongrass. What's the difference between the two? They've got a similar name.
Yes, they do have a similar name, and often with herbs, when we talk about their common names, they can have similar names, even though they are of no relation. So, lemongrass is a different variety and species of plant than lemon balm. It's not in the mint family. It's more of a grass, and it has a lovely lemon flavor, and we often see it used in Asian or Thai cooking. And many people do use it in teas, and it makes a wonderful beverage tea as well as having medicinal actions. Not the same as lemon balm. So for lemongrass, I tend to think of that as a plant used for digestive support and for improving the way we actually digest our food and the way our gut works. But lemon balm having that same quality, it is called a carminative, just like lemongrass can be a carminative. But lemon balm has many other attributes that particularly, as I said, affect the central nervous system and the brain function and mood.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. We got a question here from Maureen, who's asking a question about something that's on the website. Again, that's herbsforbrainhealth.com. And Maureen's question is, your website says hibiscus in an iced tea form is a natural remedy for cooling the fire within. Does that mean it will help for menopausal hot flashes?
Lovely. Yes, actually, hibiscus is a cooling plant. It also has an effect on the cardiovascular system, and hibiscus, both in the iced form as well as in a hot tea, will help to regulate blood pressure. And some of that effect is by actually dilating or relaxing our small microorganism circulation, so our capillary circulation. And by doing that, that allows the pressure against the heart, thus the blood pressure, to lower itself. And often with hot flashes, we have ups and downs between our contracting and our vasodilation of our small capillaries. So not only is it a cooling plant, and we would call that a refrigerant plant, a plant that helps the body temperature to cool down, it also helps to relax the blood vessels, which can make a big difference there. And so someone who's overheating, be it the sun, be it, that they maybe are in too warm of a state after activity and they're trying to cool down, using an iced hibiscus tea will help the body to cool quicker, which can make a big difference because there are some people who have more heat intolerance than others. And for that woman who has hot flashes in the evening, using hibiscus during the day, particularly in the latter half of her day, she can get her body temperature cooled down a little bit, and she may find that she doesn't trigger hot flashes as much. And that's just one of several dynamics that can cause a hot flash. So hibiscus would be useful for those caused because of changes in the blood vessels themselves.
Okay, well, I've made a note of that one myself. Thank you for that. We've got a question here from Jenny who says, at the health food store, there are various compounds for brain health. What should we make sure are included and in what amounts?
There is a really big selection at the health food store. And I think sometimes it can be overwhelming. I would certainly say when you're looking at all of your choices, don't buy the cheapest one on the counter, because I really think that, you do pay for quality. And you should be able to get information about the company and or their sources of plants. So you should be able to ask, do you know, are these plants organic? Have they, been tested for heavy metals? Have they been tested for pesticides? Those are pieces of information that you as the consumer deserve, and you should be able to get them. And your health food store should be able to find that information from the companies that they're carrying. And if they don't and can't access that information, that's a red flag to me. There are many plants that could fall into which one should I be using. And I think it depends on, are you looking for something that's more suited for memory and focus? Are you looking for something for, output of performance, stamina, and improved mental performance? And a formula like that is going to be something that's going to deliver, at the time I take it and I go do my work and my concentration's improved and I'm a better writer, or I, can do my creative computer work with less issues, and then it wears down. Whereas a formula for memory, you want to take over a period of time to really improve your memory and to support the dynamics of what that takes to have a healthy memory. Same thing for as we age and we have mental decline. The types of plants that we're going to take there are the types of plants that we need to take on a more regular basis, like Gotu-kola, as I mentioned earlier, and Bacopa, and being that. So I think, asking for information about the roles they play in the brain. And then there are some that are going to be based on scientific studies. So Bacopa, for instance, is one of the plants that has some studies on it that shows about 250 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day can make a big difference in improving your memory and reducing forgetfulness and acting as a neuroprotectant. One of the things about Bacopa that I think is a big issue, and this is why you should ask your health food store about the source of it and its purity, is that much of the Bacopa carries heavy metals with it, because Bacopa naturally grows in the trenches and roadsides of China and tends to pick up waste and substances from the earth. And so heavy metals in the ground are going to find its way into Bacopa more easily. And so it's important that the company has a commitment to have clean Bacopa in their products. And again, transparency from companies will help you to learn that information.
Fascinating. Wow, thank you. Well, for those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Dr. Mary Bove, learning about her upcoming course, Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health, which begins Wednesday, September 5th. And you can log on to herbsforbrainhealth.com for all the details and to register. Let's go ahead and get back into questions here. We've got several people asking about lemon balm. So let's go ahead and get back into that subject. I know you've already discussed it, but let me read 3 questions real quickly. Alice says, my husband has Alzheimer's symptoms, memory problems and confusion and aggressiveness. So can I give him lemon balm? She wants to know where to buy it and can she make it in a tea? Wanda says, I grow lemon balm and how do I prepare it to use? And Raina says, would lemon balm help manic periods for Alzheimer's patients? So there's a big chunk of questions about that.
Oh, I love those questions, and I think they're all really pertinent to lemon balm, and I'm so pleased to be able to speak about lemon balm, as that is one of my top favorite plants. And absolutely, what they've done recently in the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen a couple of studies out on the use of lemon balm in Alzheimer's. Typically, they qualify that to be mild to moderate Alzheimer's. And so that, again, helps us to see where it's being effective. It helps with agitation. It helps to improve sleep with Alzheimer's patients, and it also helps to diminish some of the other aspects that you asked. So yes, I would be very much thinking about using lemon balm, and there are a couple ways that you could use it. Some of what's important in lemon balm is the aromatic qualities, so what we smell. So when we make a tea from lemon balm, it's important to cover that while you're steeping it for the 10 minutes. And when you're making a tea for medicine, you probably want to use about a tablespoon of dried lemon balm. So the person who asked about how do I get it from my garden to my shelf, I would suggest cutting small bunches, drying it, or if you have a dehydrator, stripping it from the stalk. You can strip the leaves from the stalk and put it on the dehydrator and dry it. And then you're going to use a tablespoon of dried lemon balm leaves in your tea. And you want to steep that for about 10 minutes with a cover on it, and then you would drink it. At that point, you're smelling it, and the aromatic qualities of that smell will actually enter your limbic system and pick up, make you happier, less irritable, and then you drink it. And there's a water-soluble compound called rosmanic acid, which we'll be talking a lot about in our cognitive module of the course, that has a direct effect in helping the brain function, both with minimizing oxidation and helping as a neuroprotectant. So they see that the work in Alzheimer's actually improves quality of life, but has a more long-term effect on helping as a neuroprotectant. So slowing down some of that degrading of the brain tissue or the plaquing that's occurring. And what they found is generally about 300 milligrams, 2 to 3 times per day, is what the dose that they're looking at. You can do that with a liquid form by taking a half a teaspoon 3 times a day. You can also get capsules where you'll find about 300 milligrams in the capsule. You could use that. But because it is a really nice liquid form or tea, it makes it a nice way to give it. You don't want to just take the powdered herb because that's not necessarily powdered up in a capsule. That's probably the least optimal way that I would use it. And then lastly that I'll say is that they did find that using aroma, the smell, or using the essential oil of lemon balm in a spray where you atomize it in the air or the sheets of the patient, the person who may have Alzheimer's, they found that it actually helped with sleep, improving their sleep, having it more restful, and diminishing irritation during the day. And that's not ingesting it, that's smelling it. So one could take the essential oil and dab it on a light bulb and perfuse the room there, or make it into an atomized spray, or you can buy that type of atomized spray where you spray the room and it disperses around, and it has a really lovely lemony smell, which is quite pleasant to most people.
Okay, thank you for that too. Let's go to a question here from Jess. There's actually a few people asking about concussions specifically, so let's read Jess's question. It says, are there any herbs that support healing from a concussion long-term and protecting the brain and memory? And what can help with mental energy when there's fatigue? Finally, with lemon balm, which you are describing, is it okay to take during the day, or will it make people tired?
First of all, I'll answer the lemon balm question, is that it's absolutely fine to take during the day. It won't make you tired. It will relax you. And maybe if you're someone who needs to take a nap, you can slip into the nap easily, but it won't keep you from doing your work or make you feel like you want to go take a nap instead of go out and work in your garden per se. It's calming. And that calming feeling can really often help to allow our energy to get out. Sometimes when we're distracted by feeling nervous or worried or anxious, then our energy is diffused and it's not really very positive in how we can use it. So having lemon balm to actually calm us and center us, that actually can help us to then be able to use that in that way. I believe the second part of the question was what could we do to actually help perk our brain up? Or first thing I would say is there are many plants that people use that have caffeine in it to try to perk their brain up. And I do believe that will perk it up, but that is kind of a false perk in the sense that it's not long lasting. And we often we'll see a drop afterwards. When we're looking at protecting our brain and having a chance to be able to perk it up, that's where I would be using plants called adaptogens. And adaptogens work to protect our brain from stress, but they also often help our brain to function better, to perform better, not just with memory, but like with working memory and concentration, output, and stamina. So someone who may find that they get tired during the latter part of the afternoon, there could be a couple of things going on. And often that's a combination of what I call the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. And often what that is that we have issues with metabolism, typically that you'll see blood sugar being an issue in the afternoon, or lack of oxygen delivery, or energy to the brain. We often will see changes within the hormonal dynamics at that time. So using plants that are adaptogens, one that comes to mind is rhodiola, which is known as Siberian Asiatic rose. That can be very useful in perking up and improving performance. Often it's combined with plants like schizandra berry and eleutherococcus. These three adaptogen plants have been tested over and over again in Russian botanical research for their effects in improving stamina, reducing fatigue and brain performance, and helping to what shall we say, protect the brain so that it doesn't wear down and become tired as fast. And those types of plants can be taken on a more regular basis to help one in those particular aspects, as I said.
Wow, this is such good material. Looking at the clock here, we have time for a few more questions. But before we take those, I want to give a few details about the course itself. Once again, it's called Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health. And this is going to be an absolutely fascinating 5-week journey under Mary's obviously expert guidance, where you'll be proactive about your brain health to mitigate hormonal shifts. You'll sleep better, improve your memory, and help lower the risk of dementia. The 5-week course takes place on Wednesdays at noon Pacific, starting Wednesday, September 5th. And if you can't join us live, that's fine. You won't miss the teachings. You will receive audio and video recordings, transcripts, and all course handouts on your course homepage. And also, I'd like to remind you that the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until September 19th in this case to make sure that you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. Also, everyone who registers receives the Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health bonus collection. First, you'll receive a PDF guide from Dr. Bove entitled Kitchen Herbal First Aid. Next, you'll get an audio dialogue with Mary Bove and David Crow called Herbs for Children. Also, you'll receive a course participant discount from Gaia Herbs online store, good for a 20% discount on Gaia Herbs products. And when you register by midnight Pacific on Wednesday, August 29th, you'll receive this additional bonus gift, and that is a PDF guide from Mary Bove entitled Common Things for the Common Cold. So before we get back into questions, Mary, let me ask, what are you most looking forward to sharing in your upcoming course?
Most looking forward to sharing are all the hints on very accessible ways to support your brain. And I think, often we wait until something's wrong before we do things. And I have designed a number of wonderful recipes that can be taken right now, day to day, in our cooking and our beverages and our smells, that can actually help to age our brain gracefully. And I think for all of us, we know that the changes come as we age, but they don't necessarily have to impact our life in a negative way. And learning some simple ways to include plants in your lifestyle day to day to, really gracefully move through that senior part of our life. It's really exciting. And to me, I'm very excited to be able to share that and get that out and have more people using it in their life.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Let's get back into questions here. We got a question here from Dan who says, what herb can help people who worry too much and then get anxiety?
Aha, well, you'll want to tune into my module on holy basil, because one of the things they say about holy basil is that holy basil turns the worrier into the warrior. And we know that if we're not worrying, then we're not getting ahead of ourselves and we're not creating anxiety. And what some of the research that's been done on holy basil has been done where they've looked at how people have shifted their perspectives on their life. And holy basil was shown to actually help people shift their perspective in a more motivated, positive aspect, where they actually found that they had more motivation to make that change. And I think we all know when we start to worry, we can feel a victim and we can get stuck in that kind of feeling that we can't get out of that. And certainly once that occurs, it feels like it's out of our control. And I think being able to empower ourselves by using something like holy basil as a tea, as a plant in an extract, or as a scent, can really help us recognize we have a tool, so that if we find ourselves in that place where we feel like we can't see the positive, then using a plant and having that around. And in Ayurveda, this plant often is on someone's, what we would call their altar. They grow the plant, they keep the plant in the house for her energy. And so I really believe that one can actually be around the plant. I know that when I walk in the holy basil fields at the Gaia farm and walk down those fields and let my hands run across the leaves and the flowers, that smell immediately picks me up. So I think of it as yoga in a teacup.
That's awesome. Yoga in a teacup. Perfect. Thanks. Let's go to a question here from River, who says, what are the best herbs to use for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD?
Yes, post-traumatic stress disorder. And now I remember I also didn't finish answering that other question about trauma, to the head trauma. But basically, I think trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder both have two ways that botanicals would be kind of applied. First of all, we would look at adaptogen plants. Again, adaptogen plants are stress protecting and neuroprotecting, but they can actually help our body recover resilience from trauma. So that might be head trauma or emotional trauma. So they become very important. If it's head trauma, physical trauma, or emotional trauma, we may have disruption in our focus, our concentration, our distractibility, that type of thing. And using plants like Bacopa, which help with diminishing forgetfulness and help to revitalize brain cells and help with brain neuroplasticity, actually the brain, being able to remodel itself. These plants are extremely important during that time. Gotu kola would fit in there. Holy basil is a protectant plant as well to the brain. Often a plant that's used to help the brain recover from substance abuse or pharmaceutical drugs that someone has become dependent on, that type of thing, as well as emotional clarity. So with PTSD, for instance, the other category which would be useful to use are what we call our nervine plants, and not the plants that sedate us or in that sense, not the hot, strong nervines, but more what we would call the restoring nervines, those that build back a system. And because trauma from post-traumatic stress can wear down even the physical tissues of the nervous system, you want to bring that system back. So here's where particularly plants like oats, milky oats, which restore that nervous system, and it really helps when someone has been depleted and exhausted and beaten down. And so you want to combine plants that are like the bacopa with the oats and with an adaptogen like holy basil or rhodiola for that. And I found in my clinical practice that rhodiola was a really fantastic plant to be using when someone had had a head trauma, and part of their restoration of coming back with their mental focus and stamina. So those people often find that after an hour or two of using their mental capacities, they find that they're tired, and you can use rhodiola to help build their stamina back. So you don't need to like use a big dose and hit them over the head with a hammer. You want to use small amounts on a regular basis over a long period of time to bring that back in a more, let's say, kind of even capacity without kind of having anything be too over influencing to the brain, because the brain needs to take its time when it's healing.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and extend that just a little bit. That was specifically about PTSD, but let's go off into just the general world of stress. Does stress have anything to do with memory loss? What herbs would be best for? I mean, you've already pretty much discussed some of them. It sounds like lemon balm might be a good one, but maybe let's just talk about stress overall.
Yeah, stress is that really big kind of funnel that really has a direct effect within our physiological body, and particularly into our endocrine system and our nervous system. And because our endocrine system is involved in communication and hormone production, along with the neurotransmitter hormones of the brain, they're always in communication. And so I think that we do find that stress can undermine our brain health, our ability for it to function, ability for it to remember, to recall words. And I think we all recognize that when we're under stress, we become more distracted. And yes, lemon balm is a perfect plant here in that sense that it helps with focus. But I think one thing to remember is that when we're under stress, it starts to thin our fabric of the way our body is able to adapt and resist stress. And so what happens is that as stress becomes more and more chronic, our ability to resist and to adapt to it becomes more compromised. And as that occurs, we are exposed to more stress hormones. So whether that's I don't have enough money to pay my rent, I almost tripped and fell and broke my leg, or I just found out some really bad news. All of those things end up in the same funnel, going down the same pathway for stress, whether you don't eat properly, whether you don't dress properly in cold weather. And so the load of stress, as it becomes more chronic and heavier for someone to deal with, it means that we're exposed to more and more stress hormones, and that stress hormones then work against our physiology and start to compromise us, both on a physical level, emotionally. We know now that high amounts of cortisol during our sleep time is correlated to the mood of feeling more depressed. So when we're looking at ways to what should we say? Ways to protect the brain from stress. It's about making choices in our life and our day to day. It's also about, finding ways to modulate stress on what we do. So prioritizing it, and then finding ways like exercise, like using herbal adaptogens, like doing visualization or using music or coloring or journaling. There's so many ways that we can help people to modulate stress. Those are important because our load needs to be lessened. Meanwhile, herbal adaptogens help the body's capacity to recover our ability to adapt and resist. And this is the part of the stress process that breaks down. So, in our module, when we look at stress, we're going to be looking at stress, how it undermines the brain, particularly in the neurotransmitters and the receptors that are involved. We're going to also look at plants that will interface with that. And so, often with adaptogens, again, we want things to be neuroprotective, but we also want things that can help to recover and revitalize ourselves because we don't want to be caught in a vicious cycle of stress. And so I think as people begin to understand that they have tools and that they can be empowered by different things in their life to minimize or their stress or modulate their stress. And so herbs really offer help here. And so this is, I often say, herbs can help. They can help in the moment when you're stressed out. They can help to build back the body, and they can break cycles. And often with cycles of anxiety or worry or feeling down in the dumps, having a plant that can help, or a ritual or a dynamic of getting up and making a cup of tea for yourself, which means you take some time to actually give yourself self-time to actually think about and look at the plants you're taking and smell them and have that effect. And the effects of plants start right from the get-go, from what they look like in the garden or how they look like in your jar, to what they smell, to the taste. And then, they ingest in the body and their oral and energetic effects. And so I really feel like they give people an opportunity not to have to feel like they're under the finger of stress with nothing else, nothing to do about it.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for that. Now, this question isn't about brain health, but we are having some people asking. So let's go ahead. Lisa specifically wants to know, are there herbs that will safely help you lose weight without adding cinnamon or making you hyper?
Ah, there are. It's definitely a different topic, though some of the plants that we call adaptogens actually have some effects within the weight dynamic because of the way that they impact our neurotransmitters. So that means that impacting the chemistry in our brain can help to shift some of that metabolic dynamic. Then there are herbs like green tea is a herb that's used to what they call a thermogenic herb. So it actually helps the body's metabolism burn fat. So it actually puts us more in that burn fat dynamic. I think also you mentioned cinnamon, which is a glycemic modulating plant, and definitely modulating the glycemic piece. And many people think about cutting calories and then they skip meals, which is really not a good way to lose weight. In fact, that will backfire. So making sure that you have adequate calories in your diet, not too much, and that you split them up equally between 6 meals is probably one of the better ways to try to lose weight and not do that in a harmful way. And using a plant like holy basil, which helps to support your blood sugar metabolism, at the same time being an adaptogen to help to support your stress modulating effects and the dynamics in the brain chemistry, that can be also helpful at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to a question here from Kara, who wants to know, she just wants to know the normal dosage for all the herbs that you discuss. How does one know how much to take?
Yes, okay. I'd like to give you that normal doses. So it's going to vary between herbs and it varies on how strong the extract is. So one thing is you look at the dose on the bottle of that you're buying. So if you're buying from a reputable company, they have worked out a dose. Typically, when you buy a tincture, it's a 1 to 5 extract. So 1 to 5 extracts in a broad sense are usually dosed at 5 milliliters, which equals 1 teaspoon, 3 times a day. So it's important to read the label because some extracts are 1 to 3, which means the dose would change. But in herbal medicine, we have what we call a pharmacopoeia. And that pharmacopoeia tells us the dose for a 1 to 5 extract or the dose for a 1 to 1 extract, which is 5 times stronger than a 1 to 5 extract. So again, it's really important for you to read the label for you to ask the company that you're looking at. Now, when you're using just powdered herbs, like powdered up ashwagandha root in a capsule, a double O capsule gives you 500 milligrams. That's it. But when you look out there and you look at extracted capsulated forms of ashwagandha, it's going to be standardized to a certain amount of withanolides because that's the active compound. That then is going to be important in the dosing, and that should be listed on the label. So if the label tells you to take 1 cap twice a day, and you're thinking, oh, 1 cap twice a day isn't enough for me, I'm going to take twice as much, then you're probably taking too much. And that's why people put doses on the labels. So that's where I would start. And if you work with a herbalist or a naturopathic physician or somebody who's trained in using botanical medicine, then they can also help guide you in your dosing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Got a question here from Raina who says, can you still get the aromatic benefit if you've lost your sense of smell?
That's a great question. The benefit that you would get from the aromatics, one, you'll get them if you're ingesting them. And many of the plants we use in our cooking, basil, oregano, sweet marjoram, thyme, sage, rosemary, all are aromatic plants that have medicinal activity. As far as the smell, you may miss the smell of the lemon balm, but it's still going to move into that center of your brain, the limbic center. And so through that olfactory nerves, unless the nerves have a block or they've been cut, they should still allow that to permeate through. And in doing that, I would believe that it would stimulate that center and your happy center or your sense of self, raising that awareness.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Let's do one last question here. I think this is a great one to close on. Lorraine wants to know, if you had to choose just one herb, what would you recommend for everyone?
Oh, that's probably the hardest question to ask a herbalist. I would have to say, oh my gosh. It's a toss-up. I want to say lemon balm, but another part of me wants to say rosemary. And so I guess you'll have to, tune into my class to find out why I think rosemary is a good candidate. But certainly I think lemon balm, I think from like age 1 through 100, I think that typically that as a herbal tea can be, overall beneficial to everybody at some point in their life.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, this has just been a fantastic, wonderful hour. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your questions. You guys are the ones who make these conversations so interesting. Medicinal Herbs for Better Brain Health starts Wednesday, September 5th. And again, you can visit herbsforbrainhealth.com to learn more and to register. So, Mary, before we go, do you have any final words for our viewers?
I would say that herbs can help, and I think as we age, if you haven't studied plants, studying plants is one way we exercise our brain, and exercising our brain keeps us resilient.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Mary. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm going to go get some lemon balm this afternoon. Thanks for being with us. All right. Once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this class or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great day, everyone.